All right. Well, looks like we're recording. So a couple of things too before we get started. I'm a plant medicine guy, so I'm not a tech guy. So I'm first time using this kind of stuff. So if I mess up or if I accidentally log out because I was practicing going through my slides and sometimes I hit the back button. So if I disappear for a little bit, don't worry, I'll be back. But so thank you all for coming and listening to this talk. So what I'm going to do is talk about the healing power of plants. Yeah, this thing is sensitive. So one of my favorite books of all time is a book called Start With Why by Simon Sinek. And the reason I like that book so much is because so that book is about businesses and leaders and what makes them successful compared to other businesses and other leaders. And what he found is it's the people that always start with their why they're doing something before, as opposed to what they're doing or how they're doing it. And it's also kind of a great way to live your life. Like always think about why you're doing something, and your why is kind of like your guiding light. And so to take that advice, I want to start with why and say, why am I talking about plant medicine? So the reason is so it's a vehicle for developing human potential. And I'm going to get into my background a little bit more here in a second, but I've been fascinated with human potential and trying to become the best version of yourself. And I found that plant medicine is critical and for developing human potential. And another reason why plant medicine, I'm talking about it, is because it's a good opportunity to connect to nature, connect to spirit, and connect to yourself. And right now in our modern society, we've completely lost connection to nature and for a lot of people, even the spirit world. But this loss of connection to nature is a lot of the reasons why we see so much problems in our modern society, why there's a lot of illness and depression and obesity, is because we've isolated ourselves in these concrete jungles and disconnected ourselves from our home. And likewise, we've lost connection to the spirit world and even our self and our higher self, our higher vibrational self. And so plant medicine is very good for reconnecting you to all that. And it's also very good at blending the physical and the spiritual world. See, we live and we live currently on three planes of consciousness. We live on the physical, the mental, and the spiritual plane. And so in order to be the best version of yourself, you need to be strong, healthy, and capable on all three planes of existence. And lastly, why I'm talking about this is because I just want to provide you some general information on what this is and how it can help you. So a little bit about my background. My furthest background is I used to be an engineer, a mechanical engineer for the Department of Defense, which is really crazy because I was working in the belly of the beast. And I like to say that I wasn't in the matrix, I was the matrix. And so complete shift of what I'm doing now. But so started out working for the government, Department of Defense. And then shortly after I got out of that, I started working in the fitness industry. And I have 15 years of experience doing personal training, owning a gym, and running group fitness classes. And shortly before I started in the fitness industry was when my love of health and human potential started. And so that's one of the reasons why I got into the gym industry, was to help people become better and stronger. And about at this point now, about 10 years ago or so, maybe 12 years ago, plant medicine started to pop up on my radar. And so about 8 years ago, I tried it for the first time, and I realized that this was a missing component to my own journey. And so that experience helped me. It changed everything, and I knew that I needed to go further into this world. And so I started with plant medicine about 8 years ago, and then about 5 years ago, I started working with another couple and I helped them in ceremony, and I worked with them for about 5 years, helping out in ceremony. And then 2 years ago, I completed my 1 year Sama, which is the training component in the Shipibo tradition. And I'll get a little bit more into that. But this 1 year Sama is essentially what is required to get the blessing by the Shipibo to be able to run ceremonies on your own. So I was talking about the why, but now I'm talking about the what. Because when I say plant medicine, that's a very broad term. There are a lot of different plant medicines out there, and we're going to talk about some of those other ones because some of them are not even psychedelic. But what I'm talking about is I'm talking about ayahuasca, and even more specifically, I'm talking about ayahuasca in the Shipibo tradition. And even further, I'm talking about this concept called spiritual herbalism, which is something that's pretty unique to the Shipibo practices. And when I discovered spiritual herbalism, my mind was blown. So, what is ayahuasca? So it's essentially a tea. It's a psychedelic tea that is made with 2 different plants, which I will get into. But it's also a tool and a vehicle. And it's a tool and a vehicle to help you access the spirit realm. And then it's also an entity. See, another thing that blew my mind about ayahuasca in particular was this idea that you are not just taking a quote unquote drug, which is what modern society will tell you is happening. You are actually consuming a intelligence, a plant intelligence. And anyone who has ever done ayahuasca knows that it has this very motherly or grandmotherly spirit to it. And oftentimes, if people have done it, this grandmotherly spirit will speak to you directly. And so people will say, grandmother came to visit me, or I met mother, and which can seem and sound very weird if you've never experienced it. But if you have, you know that this is way more than taking a drug and hallucinating. And so it's a very beautiful thing. So with that being said, what isn't ayahuasca? And now this is very important. And this kind of applies to all plant medicines, but one of the things, so I love the word plant medicine, and I will continue to use the word plant medicine, but at the same time, I also don't like that word, and particularly because of the word medicine. And the reason I have issues with that word sometimes is because the word medicine makes you think that this is automatically good for me, because that's essentially the definition of medicine, right? But the truth is, ayahuasca is not medicine. It's, like I said earlier, it's more like a tool. And in fact, it's even more like the Force from Star Wars. And I know this is kind of nerdy or whatever, but most people are aware of the Force, and most people are aware of Star Wars. And so in that story of Star Wars, they had this force that people were able to tap into. And it was a force that bound all living beings. And this force was not good or bad. And in fact, it could be used for good, for peace. You could be the Jedi and using this to try to better the universe, or you could use it to tap into the dark side and use it for nefarious reasons and become a Sith. So ayahuasca and plant medicine is the same thing, where it doesn't necessarily care how you use it. It will amplify your intentions. And this matters a lot, especially when deciding who you are going to sit with, because if you do some Google searches, you will hear all kinds of crazy stories about things that happen to people in ceremonies, and you need to be very careful. Um, so there's a lot of people that are doing very good work with it, and there are a lot of people that are doing very bad work with it, and anywhere in between. So this is not to scare you or anything, but it's just to make you aware that who you sit with and the intentions you bring to the ceremony matter. So I was talking about so ayahuasca is a tea, and telling you that it's made with two plants. So one of the plants is chacruna, and so that's a picture of what you see right here. And so chacruna contains DMT in it, and DMT, for those of you that know, is the spirit molecule. And so DMT is essentially what connects you to the spirit world. It's a very powerful hallucinogen. And then the other plant is the ayahuasca vine. And so one of the things that's interesting about ayahuasca, and so in regards to chacruna, let me say that DMT, while very powerful, is not orally active. In fact, you could take a bunch of those chacruna leaves and you could make a smoothie out of it. You could eat them. You could do whatever you wanted, and you would never have a DMT experience. And that's because there's an enzyme in your gut called monoamine oxidase. And what that does is that basically will eat the DMT, for lack of a better word, and not allow it to cross your brain barrier. So in order to allow DMT to be orally active, you need something else. And now enters the ayahuasca vine, which happens to have what's called an MAOI. So it has an inhibitor to that enzyme. So the ayahuasca vine allows the DMT to become orally active. And also, when I mentioned the grandmotherly spirit of ayahuasca, that's also contained in the vine. And so this is where it gets well, the other thing I like to, let me say this first. So one of the big things I've learned on my journey is I'm really fascinated between the energies of the masculine and the feminine, the yin and the yang. And so these energies are the most powerful energies in the universe. So powerful that when they come together, they produce life. So these energies are everywhere and they're in everything. And it's very fascinating that ayahuasca is made with two plants. And one of them is feminine and one of them is masculine. And it's kind of funny when you talk about plants like that, because things can be interchangeable. Because I talk about ayahuasca, the spirit is a grandmotherly spirit. But so in this case, the chacruna leaves are actually feminine, because feminine energy is about expansiveness and it's about connection and it's about going higher into the spiritual realms. So the chacruna leaves are the feminine energy, and the ayahuasca vine is the masculine energy, which keeps you grounded and connected to the earth. And in fact, the vine kind of looks like a little bit of an umbilical cord. So I always have this imagination of like the chacruna leaves take us into that spirit world, and the ayahuasca vine is spiraling down, connecting us and holding us to the earth. And that's why it's such a good medicine, because it's very balanced in the masculine and the feminine. And so it's very easy to make ayahuasca. You essentially get you get the vine and you get the leaves, and you get a big pot of water, and you essentially layer them like a lasagna. and you fill that, and you fill it up with water, and you cook it down for 6 to 10 hours. At some point, you remove the plant material, and then you continue to cook down the tea until you get the consistency that you like. So very simple process, but just takes a long time. And if you look at that guy smashing the vine, so what they do is they smash the vine to open it up just to get more fibers and really get that spirit of the ayahuasca into the medicine. So if you are a curious person like I am, and you were paying attention and you were listening to the fact that DMT is not orally active and there's an enzyme in your stomach that needs to be suppressed in order to allow that DMT to be active, you might be wondering, well, how did they discover this? Because I didn't mention, and if you don't know, so ayahuasca comes from the Amazon jungle. And if you know anything about the Amazon jungle, is it's a very biodiverse place, and there are over 40,000 different plant species in the jungle, and many of these are poisonous. And so how would they know which plants to combine, especially when you realize that the plants don't even necessarily grow next to each other? The vine tends to be a lot deeper in the jungle under the canopy, and the vine tends to be a little bit more on the outskirts of the jungle. And so the oldest use of ayahuasca on record is 1,000 years old. And they came up with that date because they found some bag with some ayahuasca residue on it in a cave somewhere in Peru. So that's how they got that 1,000-year date. But what I believe and what the Shipibo believe is that ayahuasca has been used for far longer than that, thousands upon thousands of years. And so if you believe what the mainstream tells us about history, even 1,000 years ago, we know that. And then not only is it 1,000 years ago, but you're talking about indigenous people in the Amazon. There's no microscopes, there's no chat GPT, there's no Wikipedia. And so how did they know to combine these two plants? Because first of all, they would have to know something like DMT existed, and then they would have to know that it's not orally active, and then they would have to know that there's an enzyme in your stomach and that they need a plant to suppress that enzyme. So it's a crazy mystery of how they discovered this, because what the mainstream will tell you is that it was a trial and error, but there's just no way. The numbers are too vast for that to be a reality. So if you ask the Shipibo or other indigenous cultures about how they started to work with plant medicines, they will tell you that the plants told them, which at first hearing that might sound a little weird, but what this gets into is this gets into a deeper thing of what we call plant intelligence or intelligence in nature. And I mentioned a little bit with ayahuasca, how ayahuasca is a spirit and she will come to talk to you. Well, the truth is there's a lot of plant spirits that are talking to us all the time. In fact, this is what I was talking about earlier when we lost our connection to nature. This intelligence in nature, plants and rivers and mountains and trees are talking to us all the time, but we can no longer hear them because we are so disconnected. We're constantly on our phones and we very rarely get out in nature. And so according to the Shipibo, they said that there's a lot of myths of how they discovered this. And one of them is that tobacco told them. And tobacco was another very beautiful and very powerful plant. And in fact, it's kind of considered the grandfather or the father. So ayahuasca is the mother and tobacco is the father. And so once again, you see that masculine, feminine energy. But anyway, this is all to say that there's that intelligence in nature, and plant intelligence is a real thing. And this is how ayahuasca was discovered. And in fact, this is how all plant medicines are discovered. It's being connected to nature and listening to what the plants are telling us, because they're here to help us. So I talked about, so I've studied in the Shipibo tradition, and there are a lot of traditions that use ayahuasca from the jungle. And so I'm going to talk about those just a little bit to give you that there are more than one way to use ayahuasca, and each tradition is good. But so in that top left picture where you have the woman and the man, that's the Shipibo tradition. And one of the cool things about the Shipibo tradition, which I'll get into a little bit more, is it's very personal. It's a group setting, but everybody in a ceremony will receive a personal song. And this song is based on your intentions and also the energy that the curandero is feeling at the time. And one of the other cool things about the Shipibo is when they sing, every time you hear a song from them, that is a very unique song. That's a one-of-a-kind song, and you'll never hear it again, particularly when they're singing to someone, because they've developed this way to be able to move around, because energy, as we know, is very dynamic and constantly changing and shifting. And so they've developed this way to sing songs where they can manage energy time on the spot. And so that's what the Shipibo do. On the top right corner, that's a what they call a mestizo tradition, which is very similar in a lot of ways to the ayahuasca tradition. The big difference there's kind of a couple differences. Is one, they will sing songs more to the group of the room, and then they use some rattles to kind of manage the energy. And then they tend to sing more traditional medicine songs. So they're more on the outside, managing the room, singing the songs. And then in the lower left-hand corner, you've got a Colombian tradition, which is everyone tends to sit in a circle with a big bonfire in the middle. And so the fire is kind of considered the teacher, and then the shaman, for lack of a better term, will be kind of on the outside, very similar to the mestizo, singing songs and managing energies that way. And then in the lower right-hand corner is one of the most interesting ones. It's a Brazilian tradition, and this is the Santo Daime, and they drink ayahuasca in the daytime, in a room, as you see, a lighted room, and they will sing Christian songs. And so they use it more as this way to, it's a very Christian practice, and they use ayahuasca to help connect them to God. And what's interesting about that tradition is, so those of you that know about ayahuasca will know that you can purge, so you can throw up. You may have to go to the bathroom. You feel sick. It's not necessarily a pleasant experience. And so to think of doing that in the daylight under the light seems crazy to me. But one of the things I've learned, and this comes down to the plant intelligence, is the ayahuasca knows how it's being used. And so in like a Shipibo tradition, for example, they're using ayahuasca to help remove energies from you, stuck energies, dark energies. And that term dark is not necessarily bad. I just see it as it's any energy that's preventing you from reaching your highest potential. And so that's why in the Shipibo and the mestizo tradition, that's how they use ayahuasca. It can be much more purgy. Where in the Santo Daime, they're using this more as a connection to higher source. So many ways to use it, but I'm partial to the Shipibo tradition. So I want to get into the Shipibo tradition a little bit. So the Shipibo are a tribe from Peru, and they're about 30,000 tribal members. And one of the things that's really cool about them, so if you look at the dress, all the clothing that they're working, and you see these patterns, well, these are all energetic frequencies of plants. And so this is what you can see oftentimes when you're in a Shipibo tradition. And but this is to show you that ayahuasca is so steeped into their culture that basically on their clothing, in their dress. And so they're so connected to the plant world that they see the energetic of plants all the time. And in fact, so, I mentioned all the different traditions. Well, the Shipibo are highly respected and in fact are considered the best ayahuasca practitioners out there. And so much so that it's often believed that the language ayahuasca prefers to speak is Shipibo. So these are just some more pictures of the plant pattern. So they make these tapestries and it's very beautiful, and everything is done by hand. And like I said, it's fascinating. Oftentimes that when they're making these tapestries, they're sewing and they're singing and they're thinking about plants and they're putting the energy. And the Shipibo who are really into this can see a particular pattern and say, oh, that's Ahosacha, or oh, that's Morosa. And so for them, it's essentially like a language. So very cool stuff. So I'd kind of mentioned spiritual herbalism, and this is something that the Shipibo do that is very fascinating. And so your standard definition, I think I got this from ChatGPT, which is spiritual herbalism is a holistic approach to working with plants that recognizes their spiritual essence and transformative powers beyond just their physical medicinal properties. And so that's a very good definition. But I'm going to go a little deeper into that. And I don't know if any of you have heard of the 7 Hermetic principles. If you have, I'm sure they've been life-changing to you. If not, you should definitely look into these things. But if you've never heard them, I guarantee you've probably heard the second principle, which is as above, so below, as below, so above, as within, so without, as without, so within. And so what that means is, and I talked about it a little bit earlier, is that we humans, well, one, that there's multiple levels of consciousness, both higher and lower. And we humans tend to operate on three different planes: the mental, the physical, and the spiritual. And what as above, so below means is that the same rules that apply to one level apply to all the other layers, both higher and lower. So when you think about like herbalism in the physical world, like if you were to go see an herbalist, you would sit down with them and they would ask you, why are you here? What do you got going on? And you tell them, oh, I've got some digestive issues, and I broke up with my partner and my heart's broken and whatever. And so they would prescribe some plants for you to consume, and those plants would help you get better. And that's kind of how the doctor's office works. But as above, so below. So the same rule applies to the spiritual realm. So one of the most fascinating things I learned about in the Shipibo tradition is that ayahuasca is not even necessarily the star of a ayahuasca ceremony, as ironic as that sounds. Ayahuasca is, as I mentioned earlier, is more the vehicle that takes us into the spirit realm. And now ayahuasca is a beautiful spirit and a medicine into itself. And oftentimes you will communicate with ayahuasca, but the way a Shipibo style ceremony works is we all drink ayahuasca, we get transported into the spirit world, and then the practitioner leading the ceremony then calls in all these other plants that they have a relationship with. And I briefly mentioned it when I talked about my year-long Sama. So you develop this relationship with plants through a process called Sama, and Sama can be as short as 10 days or as long as a year. And I'm not going to get into too much of that because that's a whole nother talk into itself, but just know that Sama is the process of connecting with plants. And it's a very intense process. You've got to do a lot of isolation. You can only eat very limited food, and you're not supposed to watch or read anything. And the idea is that during that amount of time, you're in this monogamous relationship with a plant, and you're really only supposed to focus on that plant. And what happens is you not only get physical healing and growing from that plant, but you also get teaching. But anyway, so in a ceremony, the practitioner calls in their plants, and their plants have spiritual qualities to them, and so they can help heal you spiritually. And so based on what you have going on, the practitioner, just like a herbalist would do in the physical world, is going to use the energies of plants they have relationships with to help you get through your traumas and your diseases and help remove energy. So it's a very fascinating process, and it's a true like medicine man, medicine woman process. So these are some plants that I have a personal relationship with. And so, like I said, you get this relationship through the process called Sama. And so these are, and oftentimes we call these master plants. And what that means is it's really hard to define what a true master plant is, but usually it's a plant that has physical healing, physical medicinal properties, but then also it's got a highly evolved spiritual essence to it. And so I have a relationship with a plant called Morosa, which is very good. It's a very beautiful, very feminine, energetic plant, very good for working on your heart, opening up your intuition, and just healing you in general. And then there's Ahosacha, which was the first plant I ever did a Sama with. And it's related to the garlic family, and it's very good at helping clean out stuck energies. I also have a relationship with tobacco, although I've never done a Sama with it. But when you do this type of work, you have to have a good relationship with tobacco. And tobacco is a very programmable plant, and you pray your intention into it, and then you blow the smoke on yourself or on someone else. And then there's Ayauma, which is the tree that I dieted or did a Sama with for an entire year. And this is one of the most respected master plants out there. And it's this very big, powerful tree, very grounding, very strong, very masculine, very protective. And it's kind of considered a panacea where it can do everything. And so those were all jungle plants. And so another cool thing that I've discovered since being on this process is that these master plants are not just local to the jungle. And one of the cool things about the Shipibo, well, at least my instructor, my teacher, Ricardo Amaringo, if he gives you the blessing to run ceremonies, he's happy to train Westerners, and he's excited for you to go back to where you're from and not only run ceremonies, but then also to continue this process of creating relationships with plants. And so, when I discovered you could make relationships with local master plants and that there were plants in your local region, that was very cool and very exciting to me, because while I love the jungle plants and I will continue to make relationships with some of them, there's a whole nother level when you're able to make a relationship with a plant that you can grow, or you can go on a hike and see it, and you can actually sit with it and harvest its medicine. And so these are just some of the local master plants that are in the Pacific Northwest region, which is where I'm from. I have a personal relationship with lavender, which is very good it's another very feminine energy, very calming, very healing as well, very good for helping people with sleep issues. Another one is Oregon grape, which is the lower right-hand corner, and that's a very good for energetic protection as well as digestive issues. And then two other ones that I just put on here that I don't have a personal relationship with, but are very respected in this area is cedar and devil's club. So, so I'm talking about these plants, and I'm talking about that they have this ability to heal you when used, in not only physically but also spiritually. So what do they heal? What are they good for? Why would you want to go to ceremony? So these plants are very good at helping you helping heal you from traumas, and traumas usually come from some sort of mental or physical abuse or some sort of situation that has a traumatic effect on you. And traumas have this cascading effect where, I mean, there are some very severe traumas that people have been to that affect them throughout their life. But then there's also some traumas that maybe are not such a big deal, but because they were never addressed, they kind of spiral and cascade and become a much bigger issue. So this is a big difference between Western medicine and plant medicine. Plant medicine is very good for helping give you some healing your traumas. These plants are also very good at helping you heal from diseases, particularly autoimmune diseases. And I like that word when it's kind of broken up to say dis-ease, because I don't know how much you know about autoimmune diseases, but they're very interesting. Because the autoimmune diseases, it's not a disease that you can give to someone else. It's not contagious. But what it is your body is so out of whack and so lacking harmony that it's essentially attacking itself. And so these plants are very good at helping you gain back harmony and reharmonizing yourself and helping you overcome these autoimmune diseases. They're also very good for mental disorders and then energetic blockages, which I talked about earlier, which is kind of a catch-all term for anything that is preventing you from becoming your highest self. And a lot of energetic blockages could be bad habits, addictions, bad mental thoughts about yourself, limiting beliefs, things like that. So these plants are very good at helping you heal from that. So how does this work? And well, so there's kind of two aspects to this. There's science has a little bit about this, and then there's also this mysterious aspect about it. Because and the mysterious aspect comes around plant intelligence, and which is something. So one of the things about science is, I love science, but science has a lot of limitations, and particularly the way we talk about science in the modern world, because we are all programmed to believe that if I can't show you on a graph, if I can't give you data, then it's not real and it doesn't exist. But we all know that that's not the case. There are a lot of things that happen in our lives and in our world that science cannot explain, and that one of them is how the plants work. I'm talking about plant spirits and energetic healing, and there's no way that science can necessarily show you how this works. So one of the ways they heal is the plant intelligences, like I was talking about, is when I open up the ceremony, I call in all my plants. Well, these plants and ayahuasca and tobacco, they are very smart and super smart. And so they're able to interact with you and work with you, and they kind of know what you need. And which is kind of one of the funny jokes about an ayahuasca ceremony, is it doesn't give you what you want. Oftentimes it gives you what you need. And so that's kind of the mysterious aspect. But I do love when science can prove some of this stuff. We all like that. And so they have done some studies on how plant medicines and particularly ayahuasca works. And so what it does on a scientific level is plant medicines like ayahuasca, they shut down your default mode network. And so what your default mode network is essentially your operating system. It's just like it sounds. And so your default mode network is basically who you are on a day-to-day basis. And um, our default mode network is, there's there's a person named Joe Dispenza who does a lot of great work in helping people discover the power of their mind and potential of their mind. And he has a saying that nerve cells that fire together wire together, or neurons that fire together wire together. And so basically your default mode network gets very stuck, and which is why, like, when it comes to healing or growing, we often know exactly what we need to do. It's no secret, but it's so hard to change sometimes. And the reason is that's because our default mode network is hardwired. And so it's hard to get out of our patterns. And so ayahuasca shuts that down temporarily. And now don't let that fear you, because don't be afraid of hearing that, because it's not like you're going to become a different person. But what it does, and what I describe it as, is kind of like a defragging of the hard drive. And so your brain is kind of temporarily reset. And the other thing science has proven is that after a ceremony, your brain goes into a state of neuroplasticity. So this is a very critical time, and I'm going to get into what we call integration, because a lot of the work is done after the ceremony ends. But after a ceremony, you have this default mode, or you have a defragging of the hard drive, and then your brain goes into a hyper state of neuroplasticity, which means that now you have an opportunity to make new connections, to establish new habits and new hobbies and new thought patterns and all this kind of stuff. So very cool that science can show us how that works. And so it's not, plant medicine helps you break out of your patterns more than anything I've ever seen. And so the other thing it does is it enhances your intuition. And I kind of talked about it a little bit when it's reconnecting to yourself. So we have two minds. We have the logical mind and we have our heart mind. And our heart is our intuition. And it's the logical mind is masculine. The heart mind is feminine. And a lot of times in our modern society, because the way our society is structured, most of us are way too in our logical mind and not enough into our heart and intuition mind. And so plant medicines help reestablish that balance, which is critical, because the way the plants work, it's not logical. And the way your life unfolds and the way you get better is never logical. It's always more flowy, more intuition based. And so at the end of the day, too, these plants, they give you your power back. They show you that you are the creator of your own destiny. So this leads us to integration. And I kind of briefly talked about it. So one of the sayings when it comes to an ayahuasca ceremony is ayahuasca only works if you do the work. So meaning, oftentimes we say that the hardest stuff, that the ceremony is the easy part, and the hard work begins once the ceremony ends. Because I talked about your brain is in this state of neuroplasticity. And so now you have to do the work to establish your new habits and your new patterns. And, it's a good time to take care of your health, to start eating clean, to start exercising, to meditate, to do all the things you can do that you need to do. And, it comes down to, and another aspect I wanted to talk about is this idea of growing. So these plant medicines are very good at helping you heal, but also growing, because the healing process, while we all need to heal from things, that's only a very small part of your journey. At some point, the healing ends, and then you have to start the process of becoming better and leveling up. And so integration time is very good for helping you level up as a person. So I'll briefly talk about what to expect in a Shipibo style ceremony. So a Shipibo style ceremony is done in the dark. This picture has candles, but once the ceremony gets started, they're going to blow those candles out. And so typically it's done in a circular room. And the way it works, well, I'll talk about my ceremonies a little bit. So what you can expect is, I always test the medicine out beforehand. And so I always have a recommended dose for people. And that recommended dose is designed to be a very strong dose. It's designed to be what I call a minimum effective dose. It's in the perfect world, it's strong enough to get you into the spirit world, but not so strong that you are just completely blasted and sailing through the universe. While that can be fun and that still can happen, the purpose of a Shipibo style ceremony is not the psychedelic experience. The purpose of it is that you leave ceremony a better person than when you arrived, and you leave feeling refreshed and motivated and eager to become a better person. So there's always a recommended dose. Now we can go up or down depending on things, and there's always there's always an opportunity to drink more, but just wanted to put that out there. So everybody will drink the medicine, and then we will kill the lights. And then there will be about 45 minutes or so of silent meditation, and that's to allow the effects of the medicine to come on. And then at that point, I will start singing in Shipibo to open up the ceremony. So I'll open up the space, I'll call in my plants, and I'll essentially set the stage. I'll clean the room, I'll create a container, clean the container out. And then from there, I start calling people up individually for your personal song. And like I said, that song is based on your intentions and what I'm feeling energetically. And then after I sing to everybody, the ceremony, I'll close the ceremony down at some point. So a typical ceremony will last about 3 to 4 hours, kind of depending on how things go. And other than singing and a little bit of interaction between me and the participant, it's a silent ceremony. The only thing is the singing, and then there's also moments of quiet time, breaks between the songs. But very beautiful process, very, very effective. And so now to properly prepare for a Shipibo style ceremony, there's always a cost, right? And so that cost is a preparation diet. And so the main things is no alcohol, no drugs. I mean, these are the obvious things, no junk food, but maybe some of the not so obvious things are the no salt, no sugar, no oil, no spicy food, no sex, and no fun. And the reason that is, and sometimes people are always like, well, what's wrong with sex? And there's nothing wrong with sex. It's a very beautiful thing, but it's a very big energetic exchange. And so when I run ceremonies, I do 3 nights in a row, and there's a reason for that, because we have layers upon layers of energy on us. We have our surface layer, and then we have deeper core issues. And so something like sex or alcohol or violent movies or something you should avoid as you're preparing for an ayahuasca ceremony. And you only have to do this 1 week out. So it's not like you have to live your life like this, but all those things carry heavy surface energies on them. And so we've only got you for 3 days. And oftentimes when we have deeper issues to work on, for example, if you have 35 years or 40 years of bad habits or addictions, those are not going to come out in one night, or probably not even one weekend. It's going to take a while. It's a lot of energy that needs to come out. So this preparation diet is one part having you show up as energetically clean as possible, so I don't have to waste time cleaning surface energy off of you. And then it's another part of a sacrifice and of you showing the plants and ayahuasca, like how serious I am. I'm going to show up to you and I'm going to, because as you can look at this diet, it's not fun to do. It's hard, and it takes a little bit of a sacrifice to do it, but you get rewarded. The plants will reward you for that. All right, so now I'm just going to give you we're getting close to the end. I'm going to give you some resources so you can do some further research on your own. But one of the things I wanted to point out is, so this guy, Quentin, I don't know how to say his last name. He's a visionary artist. He's on Instagram, and he goes down to my friend's ceremony in Tulum, Mexico. And what I like about his artwork is, so he does a lot of samas, and then he paints his interpretation of his sama. And like I said, when you do a sama, you will meet the spirit of a plant. Oftentimes people will meet ayahuasca, like I said. Well, this is his interpretation of Morosa. Now, if you remember, I have a relationship with Morosa. So Ayauma and Morosa are my two main medicines. And I told you that Morosa is very beautiful and very feminine. And while I never saw her like this, when I see this picture, I see like, oh, he absolutely nailed it. I 100% know that is Morosa, and I feel it. So it's just cool to like, this is kind of some of these things you see in these ayahuasca ceremonies. Oops. All right, hold on. Okay, there we go. So I do run local ceremonies. I'm in a small town called Concrete, Washington. I'm about 2 hours north of Seattle. I run small ceremonies, so 6 people max, which in my opinion, is the perfect amount of people. I do 3 nights in a row, and they're all inclusive. So everything is covered, your food and all that stuff. And so these are my upcoming dates. I'm going to have a date in July, probably at the end of July. I haven't decided yet, but the goal is to have one ceremony a month. So if you get called to the jungle, I highly recommend this place called Niue Rao. This is where I was personally trained. You see in the middle, that's Ricardo Amaringo, who's my teacher. But I was talking to someone earlier before we started, and she was asking about, is Peru necessary? Is the jungle necessary? And what I would say is it's not. If you're called to it, I think you should listen to that calling, because there's something beautiful about being in the jungle, and there's something beautiful about sitting in front of a Shipibo person, and there's nothing like it. But it's also it's a lot of effort to get down there. And one of the things I've learned by working in this for almost 10 years is that you can get very good ceremonies here outside of the jungle. And I'm not saying that because I do it, but you really can. You can get very good ceremonies. But if you are called to the jungle, I can highly recommend this place. And I can also recommend some other places if you want, so you could reach out anytime. There's a documentary called The Song That Calls You Home. Now, there are a lot of documentaries on ayahuasca, but this is the best one I've seen. And this is also the best one that talks about the Shipibo tradition. And in fact, a lot of the documentary takes place at Niue Rao, and you will see Ricardo in that documentary. So definitely recommend this if you want to go a little deeper. Another good source is this book called The Fellowship of the River by Dr. Joe Tafur. Now, Joe Tafur is a very fascinating guy. He's a Colombian American who went through medical school here in the US. And as he was going through medical school, he also discovered plant medicine. And he is actually one of the founders of Niue Rao. And so this book, basically, he's able to, you see two sides. You see the Western medicine mindset, and then you see the plant medicine, you can't think of the word, but the plant medicine mindset. And because one of the things he discovered, and it's a big problem in Western medicine, is Western medicine is just treat your symptoms, and which is why Western medicine, in a lot of reasons, is not very effective, because it just treats your symptoms. So, for example, if you're depressed, they don't necessarily ask you why you're depressed or even care. They just give you a medicine to suppress your feelings. Where plant medicine, they go into start looking at why, and we start trying to get to the root of things like depression. And oftentimes those can come from traumatic events or whatever. So anyway, you get to see the two sides of someone coming in with a particular issue, and the Western approach, and then the plant medicine approach. So very, very good book. Can't recommend it enough. I also have a podcast called The Deeper You Go, The Weirder It Gets, and it can be found on all platforms. And I talk a lot about ayahuasca, plant medicine. I documented my whole year-long journey on the podcast, so you can really get an insight to what I was going through, which is a very crazy process. I lost 40 pounds of basically muscle, because I didn't have 40 pounds to lose. And so I got very sick, very weak. But anyway, and then I just kind of talk about anything that just strikes my fancy. So the key takeaways for this is ayahuasca and plant medicine in general is a great tool for developing human potential. But with that being said, ayahuasca is not for everyone, right? There are many ways to the top of the mountain. And if you feel called to ayahuasca, I think you should listen to that calling. And if you're here listening to the talk, maybe that's your sign. But whether ayahuasca is for you or not, or whether plant medicine is for you or not, I do believe that you should have some sort of spiritual or energetic practice in order to reach your full potential. Like I said, you need to be strong and healthy mentally, physically, and spiritually. When it comes to choosing a practitioner and your own approach to using plant medicines, do your research, your mindset going into it, the setting in which you're doing it, and the person leading the show. All these things matter, and they matter way more than you think. So please don't just do it with anybody. You should ask the person you're doing it with. You should ask them some questions. But anyway, and so plant medicine is not a medicine. So like I talked about, it's a tool. And another good analogy for plant medicine is it's fire, right? Fire is a very powerful thing. It can cook your food. It can keep you warm. It can save your life. It can keep the predators away. It can give you light. But if fire gets out of control, it can burn your house down. It could burn the forest down. It can burn an entire city down. So plant medicine should be thought of the same way, that it should be handled with care and respect. And then finally, integration is critical. And this is one thing you should ask if you're looking to sit with somebody, what their thoughts are on integration. Because if they don't talk about integration, I would look at that as a big red flag. And so plant medicine only works if you do the work. And if you do need help with it, I do offer coaching. So this is the ways to contact me. If you want to take a photo of the QR code, that'll get you to my Linktree page, or if you just want to take a picture of the screen, you can sign up for my newsletter, and on my newsletter, I will tell you about ceremonies, anything I got going on. And you can reach out to me at any time for more questions. I'm happy to answer them. So with that being said, thank you all, and I'll open this up to any questions you may have. Any questions? Anyone there? Okay, well, I guess if there's no questions, I'm going.
Sorry, I had a question. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. This is a question that I did wonder about. There are two questions actually. You say you're in Washington. This is not to do with the Aya, but where you're based. You're in Washington State?
Correct.
This is going to sound like a really strange question, but are you anywhere near orcas?
Near what?
Orcas. Orcas.
Like the whales?
Yeah.
Orcas Island.
Orcas, killer whales.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I'm very close. I've actually never seen one. But
That's weird.
I'm very close. Well, I don't go to the Sound all the time, but yeah, they're in the Sound. So yeah,
right.
there's a lot of killer whales around here.
Yeah, because that's my spirit animal, and I just thought it was really weird that you're from. And I was wanting to go to Washington State to see the orcas, and I got an orca card. I got an orca card recently to go. So yeah. Anyway, the second question, which is really more connected to the Aya, the one thing that I thought about and wondered about was how does it work for people who are living. So, for example, much of my recent issues have been brought about by the society in which I'm living in, and I can't really, I can't really kind of. It's problematic, and for me, as the person that I am in this country, and it causes me a lot of pain, and it causes me a lot of harm. It causes me a lot of emotional harm. And I did wonder, doing Aya, how does it work for people like me who have to come back to the very society that's causing some of the harm for me?
Yeah, I mean,
because you're steeped, because you can't change societies, and you can't. Do you understand what I mean without me kind of spelling it out?
Oh yeah, I mean, I understand that very well, and that's a very good question. And I mean, it's hard to give you a straight answer, but what I can say is, yeah, because oftentimes when you go to a ceremony, you're in this artificial environment, everything's taken care of for you, and you have all these insights, and you feel good, and then you go back home, and you go into your environment, and oftentimes that environment for some people is a big reason of why they are going to these ceremonies in the first place. So I totally understand that. And I mean, this is where like the integration work becomes very important. And then also doing whatever you can to find community around you and start, I mean, I know like certain time based on family issues and this and that, it's not always easy to completely detach yourself, but there are ways to do that. And I say that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So anything you can do to help that process it adds up very quickly. So yeah, it's something that's real, and it's something that's a struggle, but it's not something that can't be overcome. It's just going to be work, unfortunately.
And if I can add something to that, Garett,
yes.
Eleanor, around the world, there are these organizations called psychedelic societies, and you live in London, correct?
Yeah, near London. Near London.
Yeah, so London would have probably many of these type of organizations where it's people who are working with plant medicine and consciousness who get together both in online forums such as this, but also in person to discuss their experiences, to help integrate their experiences and share in community. So, if this is something that you decide to do, it would be good for you to kind of look at those in advance of your journey and find those sources of community in advance and start attending some of these events and some of these talks and some of these community gatherings.
Because my sort of thought was, in order not to be damaged, was just to leave the country and move somewhere else, just to move to another country. And I was thinking of Colombia, actually. Yeah, that's so that I can feel that more holistic kind of, that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's a couple things about moving, and what do they say? They say no matter where you go, there you are. And then the other thing too, if moves are ever decided through medicine work, it's always advised to wait a good couple months before you make any major life decisions or changes, such as moves, especially internationally, ending relationships, things such as that. It's always good to kind of wait and really kind of sit on it, meditate on it, really integrate what the decision process looks like. We can feel it through medicine, but it's always good to give it some cognitive processing before we kind of make those leaps.
Yeah.
And blessings to you, Eleanor.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Good question, and thank you, Guy. And just so everyone knows, Guy works with me in ceremonies as well too. So he's very good, very knowledgeable at this stuff.
Thank you, Garett.
Any other questions?
Is Eleanor coming to Washington?
I orcas are my spirit animal, and I had wanted to go to Washington State since last year.
Well, there you go.
It was so weird. Yeah, I've got to go to Washington State to see the orcas, and
We'll take you.
and then you're saying you're from Washington State, and I'm thinking this is some synchronicity going on here.
There's no such thing as coincidences. So.
No. And the Puget Sound is 40 minutes from where we live, and there's all kinds of different whale tour operators
really?
out of the Puget Sound. That's correct.
I just love them. I have this connection with them, which is
They're amazing. Yeah. I've seen them in the wild here, and it's just crossing the ferry, heading over to Vancouver Island, and saw a pod of 4 of them. It was pretty amazing. Yeah.
Wow.
All right. Well, if there's no other questions,
Garett, I'll just share really fast, not to butt in. But I sat with Garett a couple times, and I just got back from 5 weeks at Niue Rao in Peru. Did my first longer term Sama. So I'm really grateful for this call and to meet more people in the community. And if I can, be of any help, just from a pure perspective of just recently going through this journey for the first time in Peru, I'm happy to help, happy to answer questions. I see my friend Justin is on the call, so good to see you, and thank you again for hosting this, Garett. This was really awesome.
Yeah, thank you for helping spread the word.
Absolutely.
And so I'll end it with this by saying, feel free to reach out with any questions. I'm happy to answer them via email. If you want to get on a talk, I'm happy to do that as well too. So I'm here to help you. So thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Garett.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
guys.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.